Checkmate. Dude, this is magic. Nah, I thought this was Yu-Gi-Oh. Those are two different games. What are? Yu-Gi-Oh! And chess! And are you gonna address them? Who? Them! Nah, this is just a bit to set up the topic I want to talk about. What? Turn-based games. A medium in which I have seen a great divide in quite a few people. The consensus I have come to is that you really, really like them, or you don't. While that statement can be a bit hyperbolic, there are those who find the act of playing them kinda boring. For the common people, there are two main types of games. There's technically more than that, but for the sake of this video, we're gonna boil it down to these two main archetypes. The first being turn-based, one in which you have an exorbitant amount of time to sit and decide your actions. Think Final Fantasy, Persona, Fire Emblem, Dragon Quest, etc. While the other is action-based games. These are the ones that are continuously moving. Whenever you take a step, several other actions occur at the exact same time. Think your Ninja Gaidens, Call of Duty, Bayonetta, Nier. You really like Platinum games, huh? Could you tell? Anyways, as someone who considers themselves a variety gamer, I kind of come at turn-based games with a lot of love and appreciation for them. And I feel as though there's so much to talk about when it comes to turn-based games, but no one really tries to give it all the flowers it deserves. And let me be honest, I don't even think I'm going to be able to do that in this video. But there's a question I always have to ask. Is turn-based great? Man, that felt really early 2000s. Focus. Something really interesting about these genres is that they are, if you really want to break them down, strategy games. Listen, the main thing when it comes down to describing turn-based is that a lot of people kind of have a misconception of this archetype. Genre, ask anyone on the street what kind of turn-based game they have played in their life, and they'll probably say a Pokemon game. Like, look, here, let me show you. Never mind, I'm too much of a coward. Also, this is a fucking box. But for the most part, the general public has mainly experienced turn-based through the lens of Pokemon. And let's be real honest, Pokemon is baby's first turn-based. Now, don't get me wrong, Pokemon is a perfectly fine game with a lot more deep mechanics and details in it than people give it credit for. But if you're not doing challenge runs or playing it competitively, a lot of the staples that make turn-based games so important don't really show themselves in Pokemon. Specifically, you can basically beat most of the mainline games with just 1 to 2 Pokemon, and they only have to have attack moves. Realistically, when you consider a lot of the elements that are staples of turn-based games, you don't see or experience them that much in generic games, and you need to branch out. Mechanically speaking, on average, many turn-based games are going to be way more in-depth than you would possibly give it credit for. Not only are you factoring in things like weaknesses, type advantages, or damage scaling moves, you also have to take into consideration things like buffs, debuffs, am I poisoned, am I slowed, what effects are put on me, as well as hidden mechanics that exist under those initial effects. You don't really learn the consequences of things until you get afflicted with them. On average, when you're playing these games, they might give you moves that do a lot of damage, but they could have trade-offs. Things like take an extra turn to cast, get afflicted by negative debuff, a low chance to hit, or moves that are only beneficial if they're used in tandem with other effects. Things like Bewildering Grace in Octopath Traveler, or sleeping in Persona games. Bewildering Grace has a chart of effects that can occur ranging from really good in helping out the team, such as increased attack or experience gains, etc., to really bad, leaving you at one shot and killing the team. Sleep, and by extension most status effects in Persona games, give characters the ability to auto-crit if they use physical moves, but the game, I believe, does not tell you that. You have to learn by doing them. These are just the common examples I could think of, though. A lot of the time, turn-based games reward you for exploring other options by giving you more information and letting you figure things out on your own. Sure, you could possibly play the game by just wailing on the creature, but that will only get you so far, especially when you get into higher difficulties. We're not even factoring in things that can be unique to individual games, such as advantages, disadvantages, classes, move priorities, the whole 9 yards. There's a lot of complex thought that goes into each action and reaction about how you face the situation in front of you. This happens so often to the point where you have to consider interactions even before you get into real fights. This isn't even mentioning the fact that turn-based games have different mechanical structures based on what game you play. Just because you played Pokemon does not mean you know how to play Fire Emblem. Hell, games made by the same studios don't even play the same. Shin Megami Tensei does not play like Persona 3, 4, or 5, which doesn't play like Metaphor ReFantazio, which doesn't play like Devil Survivor. All of those are made by the same studio, Atlas, but they play relatively differently. Turn-based is a genre that has multiple subgenres that help determine the uniqueness of how you play and how to tackle challenges. It's just like how every action game has its own subgenres. Do you want to play a hack and slash, Souls-like, boomer shooter? You get what I'm saying? The fact that people write off multiple turn-based games can come from the fact that they haven't experienced one that meshes with them yet, and they write the genre off as a whole because of this. But here, Baldur's Gate and Expedition 33, 2 games I own by the way, are considered Game of the Year from the respective years they were nominated, and they both are turn-based games. But if I were to show you the footage of how they're played, you should recognize that these are played entirely different. Yes, I'm taking turns, but they are done wildly different, and every character has wildly different moves. The multiple factors that go into determining how to play and what turn-based game you do play is intriguing, but that's not the only thing that is really important when it comes to mechanics. And here, I'm going to put some gameplay on the screen of multiple different turn-based games. You might notice something. Have you noticed it? Here, it's quite simple. There's always usually more than one guy on the field at any time. Now, this one aspect isn't the main thing that makes this genre so interesting, of course. I mean, we talked about Pokemon earlier, and that game usually has 1v1s, but I feel like we're not really considering the importance this has on the overall reasoning behind the style of game being used. Every one of these individual characters on your side, you have control over. You have to plan the action, set yourself up for the next turn, and act in accordance to the information your opponent gives you. Your team's interaction is not limited by just having to continuously attack the opposite side, but also by interacting with the team itself. Traditionally speaking, if you're playing these games, you are always considering things like, who do I bring? Do I need a lot of healing? Are debuffs probably going to be really important in this fight? Is this opponent weak to X or Y? You're not just battling the enemy, you're also managing your supplies and units to find the most optimal option available to you. This mechanic in of itself is not something that is easily replicated in other games. Yes, if you're someone who has played a little bit more than your average JRPG or other games, you could be yelling at me about things like Xenoblade, the Final Fantasy VII remakes, or Tales of games, and while we might get into those later, you also have to consider that those are exceptions to the rule. What was my point? Right. The main thing about having multiple people on the field is that there is going to be so much information going on at any given time. You need to have safe points to take in all that data and then interact in accordance with what is given. There's also the fact that, just like we talked about earlier, there's so much complexity going on in the game that not everyone will be able to handle all of that occurring on multiple characters simultaneously. It can be a struggle for some people. Not me though, I play Titanfall. I'm used to this type of shit. Aren't you like super bad at most games? And isn't that game dead? No, to both of your statements. The closest things you got to this in real-time combat are things like team-based games such as Marvel Rivals, Overwatch, Deadlock, and raids and MMOs. Things where you gotta cooperate with others. But here's the thing. The key word is others. The unique thing about turn-based is that a lot of the time they are single-player games. They are emulating that feeling of having a large group deal with a big situation. You, and only you, the individual, are making key decisions to build your team up in your ideal way. Every character on the squad who gets what, it's always up to you. This means a lot of the decisions are put into your hands, and now you have to consider everything. This also means that a lot of the mistakes made are also going to be yours, and you gotta face them head on. You can't blame other people for whatever happens. Just because you have certain options doesn't always mean it's going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. Unexpected things can happen with combat that requires you to drastically change your strategy. Enemies can have resistances and immunities. This can make encounters harder. And with the uniqueness of most encounters, the act of giving you multiple opportunities to test abilities and set up ideal situations to weigh the odds in your favor is very much needed. Turn-based not only gives you that, but also gives you time to think about the actions and what you will do, but also to analyze the situation in front of you and design a strategy in a more thoughtful way, especially when it comes to future encounters. Real-time combat, in comparison, relies more so on pattern recognition and instinctual reflexes. Most enemies in the game have semi-telegraphed attacks that once you know what they are, they become a lot easier to dodge, at the very least, read. Whereas in turn-based, even if you know what every enemy in the game can do, you also have to consider who's on first, what's on second, and I don't know who's on third. And what I mean by this is that every enemy has different weaknesses, resistances, and different ideal ways to deal with them. Which means now, you the player must consider each character's approach, what the ideal options are. Each interaction can drastically change depending on the enemies that show up. Do I have to save TP for this attack? Do I have to save TP for bigger attack? Do I use an AoE? Should I heal the low health ally? Everything becomes risk-reward management in comparison to something like action-based game, where the surface overall risk management falls under when is it my turn? But Ivy, these structures exist in real-time action games too. Why the fuck did I give you that voice? Anyways, to a lesser extent, yeah, you're not entirely wrong. Real-time action games have a risk-reward structure to them, but it's less on a preparation basis, but more so in the moment. Usually you would question, do I dodge here, block there, attack now? Do I want to hit faster, better, stronger, Daft Punk? And these mechanical structures more so affect how you react rather than how you interact. All right. I know I've kind of been alluding to this, and it's really of importance that we discuss why I keep bringing it up. Interaction and reaction is a very key point in games, but it can also be something that is, well, really hard to explain. This mainly comes from the fact that it's my own personal distinction between the two that can be very lenient, but I'll try my best to explain it for you. In my opinion, this is something that exists to evaluate how you're tackling the game. Interaction usually insinuates that the player is constantly learning and applying what they know about the game to better influence their overall experience. You start to experience interaction when you dive into deeper mechanics, you use more resources to get better items, you're spending time investing in the game, and it rewards you, whether that be in items or being better prepared for future scenarios. Whereas reaction is mainly used for in the moment events. If something happens, how do you respond to that problem? If you're stabbed, do you heal yourself or do you try to just shake it off? If you're poisoned, do you cure yourself or do you let it burn down and try to win based on just hitting them? In a weird way, you can kind of perceive this as you manipulating the game or the game manipulating you, interaction or reaction. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because in games as a whole, you're going to experience both, but most of the time I see turn-based as mainly the interaction-focused one and action games as the reaction-focused one. Again, as I've insinuated before, because you're forced to spend a lot of time learning and utilizing mechanical structures to your advantage, you're forced to interact and engage with the game on a deeper level. You can't just learn by seeing something and responding in accordance with it. You must also test things out and work to better understand what is happening. This isn't to say there isn't any reaction in these games. You do have to determine what to do based on enemy moves and what shows up, but how you tackle and interact can vary differently based on your preferred way to deal with the situations. You also have reaction in certain games depending on how the turn-based is structured. Things like Expedition 33 have reaction-based actions you can do if the opponent is attacking. You can dodge, parry, and things of that nature to lower the damage done to you. Real-time combat, on the other hand, is more so reaction based because you're acting in accordance with how your opponent determines the flow of the combat. If they attack, you dodge. If they are squishy, you continuously hit them. If they're bulky, play patiently and wait for your opportunity. The interaction is still there, as you must know what is mechanically required of you, but you are still mainly influenced by the type of enemy you are fighting, and you're more likely to rely on a core 4 to 6 moves with maybe some additional flair. But hey, if you think this is a wrong way of kind of generalizing it, tell me. This is more of a personal opinion rather than a concrete one, and I'm making it based more so on generalization than specification. It just seems to be that you will more so spend time learning and interacting with actually turn-based games rather than action-based games where you will probably learn some mechanics but disregard a lot of them to do what you find dominant. Personalization and personality is really funny to talk about when it comes to games. What I mean by this is that games usually have some form of personal expression when it comes to how you tackle them. Do you get more health? Do you go for speed, defenses, attack upgrades, what have you? Now, what makes this interesting is that in real-time games, you have to experiment with one at a time until you figure out what truly clicks with your playstyle. You don't really want to change unless you feel like it's gotten too boring or you're doing challenge runs either, so it is. Same can be said with turn-based games even, but they more so reflect how you want your team composition to work. How many DPSs do you want? Do you want physical attackers, special attackers? Do you like buffers, deep buffers? How do you want them to work together? And usually because turn-based games provide you with more characters than there are active slots, you must determine who makes first billing, who are swappable characters, and who are perma-benched. Just like how you play action games can say a lot about your personality, how you build your team greatly shows what you value and how you build synergy. But that's not the only point where personality comes into play, because turn-based games are more often than not story-based. You get a lot in terms of actual plot and how characters interact with the environment around them. Something I kind of came to realization about in recent years is how the story is perceived based on our interactions with it. What a deep concept, I know, but let me get more into it. When you spend time with characters and you see things through their perspective, you start to gain more of an attachment to them, right? Well, because these games can be super long and sometimes the story does not feel like it's necessary to talk about every character in the main narrative, a lot of characters could become sidelined and or forgotten. Usually you can make up for this by introducing things like side quests and side stories to help flesh out characters, but if you're not already interested in them or 100%ing the game, it's really hard to get people invested in additional characters outside of the main guide. However, and this could just be me, but I noticed my feelings on certain characters can greatly change based on their performance in-game. For instance, I'm going to talk about Junpei Iori from Persona 3 here. While he is not my top used character in recent times, I do remember him carrying me in very clutch scenarios as a kid when I played Portable. And I believe Junpei is coded to crit more often than most of the other characters. Because of this, Junpei could become a very clutch member who turns the tide of battle, and you could greatly appreciate what he does. And because he's an early member, you could build some more rapport with him in comparison to the other physical attackers such as Akihiko and Aigis, because he has proven himself and he has more time to sit there. For me, because of his clutch nature, it led to a lot of appreciation for his character, and it made me feel more empathetic to him when he blows up or talks about feeling inferior to us and comes out with his problems. It made me more interested to learn about his character. But some people might not do that. Some people have their own issues with Junpei and his actual character, especially if they did not experience that clutch nature he has, and they give him less grace. I mean, there's so many people online who will have conflicting feelings about how he acts. This also happened in Fire Emblem Awakening. When Donald just started to become a hardcore carry in that game, I appreciated his character more, and I started to look at his actual situation with more loving care. However, if your Donald is performing terribly, although I can't imagine that happening, then you might consider benching him. What I'm getting at here is that turn-based games also provide a chance for the player to connect with characters on a deeper level. When characters crit, you can get really hyped about it, especially when it's in really intense scenarios. On the flip side, when characters miss, you can feel it's a personal slight on you, and it throws off how you feel about them. This is also further influenced by the fact that characters have unique attributes associated with them, meaning if you want to use them for their attribute, you're going to spend more time learning about them because they have to keep performing and being with you. The deep investments and reliance on characters to do what you want builds a form of camaraderie with said characters. There's also the fact that some games, most games nowadays, have quote lines to further instill personality into the characters that could otherwise have gone unrecognized, making it so you can see more of their personality in short segments. I also believe that this further helps that narrative in multiple ways. The way a character plays can be a narrative reflection of how said character interacts with the world, and you can read more into it and become curious to know more about them. And the game having you control all these characters and having them grow and be in unison can make it feel as though these people are working together and growing together as a team. Depending on the story, this also furthers the point in which the author is trying to convey, whether it be different backgrounds becoming a unified force, a handful of people capable of breaking the mold, or showing how having a somewhat healthy support system can help in any scenario. Why is this an advantage in turn-based specifically? Okay, the reason why I bring this up in turn-based games is because while action-based combat can have interesting characters, it kind of has everything to do with what I said earlier. A lot of personalities can be muted and not fully expressed unless you do side quests to see them. If you're playing action-based games that let you swap in between characters who you play, one, you're only seeing one personality at a time in comparison to the possible 3 to 4 in turn-based. And two, if that character's style doesn't really match the way you want to play, you can kind of ignore them and not gain favorability. Although, now that I say that, certain characters in turn-based games can perform so poorly or not be that interesting that you can also just forever bench them, but that also has to do with how you experience them. It's not a perfect system, mind you. Some people's favorite character can be your most hated character, and vice versa. But you can also learn how to force your favorite character to fit within certain rules, even if it's not always going to work out. This also lends to the idea that a game could be played multiple times because one run might have one character be your hard carry, and another run, things can change drastically. In a way, the game can sometimes even encourage you to play suboptimally if you like a character more than you deem it necessary to play to the dominant strategy. Yes, the way you personally feel about how you make a team can be influential about your initial pickings, but because certain mechanics are tied to specific characters and their personality comes with it, it can greatly influence how you tackle the game afterwards. When I think about the entertainment and engagement factors of these games, there's always an issue that comes up. Because on average these games are narrative focused, it's hard to talk about them and explain what makes them so great without going into spoiler territory. A lot of the deep and structurally strong aspects of turn-based games, not only in terms of narrative but also gameplay, occurs further down the line. This makes it really hard to talk about and convince others to play these games because you have to either explain things in very, very vague terms, and it might not be that interesting, or just say the plot and hope they find that it's just ridiculous enough to play it and experience it themselves. My hypothesis as to why a lot of people don't really like the idea of playing turn-based games though, and I do mean idea, is because, and let's be quite honest, watching this can be a little boring. You see, the vocal people who might spread the idea that turn-based is a subpar genre might be those who need a lot of visual stimuli, or creators who don't know how to make the act of playing these games entertaining. As has been stated, a lot of the actual combat and overall interaction with the game comes down to how the player builds their team and what they use to further their goals. It's very personal to the person who is playing it. If you really want to play the game and rely only on base strategy and don't consider what you need, you can consistently put yourself into frustrating scenarios that make the game artificially harder and write the genre off as a whole. And while ignoring those people who need constant visual stimuli for a second, when discussing the content creators, this isn't to say people don't enjoy watching others play them. No, that could be further from the case. I believe the reason why others watch people play turn-based game is to see how they interact with the game they like. The other option is that viewers want to play vicariously through them. This means that the audience that watches are usually coming for your personality, which means you have to be somewhat established and known to people. And because these games almost always provide multiple ways to tackle them, you could be left open to a great amount of criticisms, especially if you choose not to engage with key systems, meaning people could start to personally attack you, or you could feel vulnerable to being seen as incompetent. On an entertainment value, these games highly reward you for experiencing it yourself and greatly encourage it. However, on an engagement value for content creators, it can foster a tight-knit community of people who really like the game and want to see others experience it, especially you, but it can be a little judgy and you could feel a little off-put to actually show it. Okay, well, there's just one looming question after all this. Is turn-based the best genre? No. Or more honestly, it's a personal preference. While I did spend a lot of time in this video talking about the turn-based genre and talking down real-time combat, it's mostly because many people already experience and like that genre. Downplaying, in my opinion, doesn't do much in this scenario, and I love both, and I'll play both of them as much as I can. Do I think you should give turn-based a try though? At least every now and then, yeah. Just because you don't like Dragon Quest doesn't mean you're not gonna like Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics, or really any of the mainline Final Fantasy games. They all play differently as well, or any of the Persona games, what have you. It just means you didn't like that one game. Others might interest you more than the other. I find it always helps to branch out of your comfort zone and try something new, especially if you think the games that you're playing now are getting stale. Because of the fact that turn-based games are usually the longer game to play, you're gonna spend a lot of time investing in getting to enjoy the actual series more so than others sometimes. But if you don't like them, you don't like them, and that's perfectly fine. But realize that it's just one type. And hey, you should probably make friends with a guy or girl who really loves turn-based games. They can give you better personalized recommendations than anyone on the internet can, and you might find something you like more than the hottest thing because of their personal recommendations. For me personally, if I want to sink a good portion of time into something, I'm most likely going to go play a turn-based game. But it doesn't mean I'll cut out all real-time combat as a whole. But hey, if you think I'm wrong, or right even, tell me in the comments. Or I might even talk about other turn-based games, but I highly doubt this will reach many people. Anyways, I hope you liked the video, and if you did, might as well hit the button to show me. And I'll see you in the next one. Adios.